Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sotah Daf Yud. This is the daf for Shabbat Chol Hamoed of Pesach. So we finished up with this drasha. Yachel Oshet Yisrael Amar Rabbi Chamer Rabbi Chanina. End of yesterday's daf. Uchal Shvuato Shel Avimelech Dechtiv Im Tishkor Li Ulinimi Ulinechti. Abraham said, if you lie to my children or my grandchildren or my great grandchildren, basically meaning Avimelech had taken this pact with Abraham, and if he desecrated it, then that's what happened here, and that's why it said Yachel. He went to go save the Jewish people from the Plishtim, who were the descendants of Avimelech, who had basically rebelled against or gone against, broken their contract between them. Vayidal hanav v'yiracheu Hashem. So now he grows up. Again, we're continuing all these drashot about Shimshon. Just to give you an overview of the daf, we're going to go through drashot of Shimshon. From there, we're going to get to the story of Yehuda and Tamar, which also has a lot to do with prostitution and znut and all of that, connected a little bit with the Sotah issue, similarly to Shimshon, who also had a bit of a strange track that he went on. And then we're going to get off on a tangent in the middle of that to Abraham, back to Yehuda and Tamar, and then we're going to finish off with Avshalom, who was mentioned in the Mishnah. We're going to go back and darshan psukim about Avshalom. So now we're going back to an early pasuk in the Shimshon story. Vayiracheu Hashem, he's blessed by God. In what way is he blessed? His sexual organ was blessed. Amato kibnei Adam, it was like everyone else's, but zav'o kenachal shoteh. His semen was like an overflowing river. Basically, he was able to have, create a lot of children. We'll get back to this theme in a little bit later. Hashem Elokim zachareni now. Okay, now that we're doing a lot of zigzagging back and forth. We're now talking about the end of his life when he's about to be destroyed by the Plishtim. He says, please remember me, please strengthen me this time as well. And I will revenge them at least for one of my two eyes take my revenge out on the Plishtim because they blinded him. So the question is, what did he say God should remember me? Remember, what did he do that he's worthy of being remembered? Amar Shimshon said before God, Zechor, right, creator of the world, Zechor li 20 shana sheshafatati Yisrael. Remember the 20 years I ruled as a judge of the Jewish people. Some people have Ushtayim, there's these 2 years that are debatable whether we call them as part of his reign or not. It doesn't matter, we're not going to get into that right now. In all the 20 years I was a judge, I never said to any one of them, help me, be my staff, or bring me my staff to be able to walk from place to place. We'll see later, the Midrash says he actually didn't have both of his legs. It's hard to believe Shimshon didn't have his legs. How did he manage to do all these other things? But basically what he was saying is I was a true judge and I didn't ever ask for any favors. We all know judges and favors and where that usually leads to. Now we have this story where he goes and he takes 300 foxes. And what does he do? He ties their tails to each other and then he lights them up on fire in between each of the two tails. And then he basically burned tons of the fields of the Philistines. So why specifically foxes? We're going to use to punish them. This is again the midah keneged midah. The one who walks backwards. Okay, apparently foxes don't turn around and run like most people, like most animals or people would do, but they run backwards. And yiframi plishtim shachazru b'shvuatam, and this will be a getting back at avenging for the plishtim that turned away from their agreement with us. We had an agreement that we talked about with Avimelech. And they turned around the way, right, in an unnatural way, like the foxes do. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Shimon HaChassid, Ben tefav shel Shimshon, shishim amah haya. Between his shoulders, 60 amot. Okay, a cubit is, right, the lower part of the arm. It's a little bit of a lot of an exaggeration, trying to show how giant he was. Shene'amar, how do we know this? Vayishkav Shimshon, a different story. This is when he goes to Aza and he finds the Zonah that we saw in the previous stuff. But then it says, "Vayishkav Shimshon machatzi alayla." He slept until midnight. Vayacham machatzi alayla. V'yachos b'delchot shal ha'ir u'b'shtei hamezizot v'yiseim im ha'bariach v'yasem al tepav. So in the middle of the night, he gets up and he goes and grabs the doors of the gates of the city and he basically carries them out of the city of Gaza. So what does this have to, and he puts them on his shoulders. What does this have to do with 60 cubits? Well, Gemire, we have a tradition, the doors of Gaza were at least 60 cubits, and therefore if he put them on his shoulders, it must be his shoulders were 60 cubits, right, between one to the other. Quite an exaggeration. Anyway, we'll move on. Right, what to do with these stories, not these midrashim, it's not always so clear. This is after they blind him, they take him to Gaza, and then they tie him up in shackles, and then it says that they put him as a tochen, as a grinder in the Beit HaSurim. Now, grinder usually means, right, he worked at the mill. What this means is, china generally means having sexual relations in sin. So what does that mean? How do we know this? Pasuk from Eov, and the previous pasuk we're going to see in a minute, which is, if I cheat on my wife, then my wife should basically cheat on me. Okay, it's like I will get, if I were to do that, this is what my wife would do. My wife will be grinded by some other man. Okay, that means she's going to sleep around with some other man. So there you see the root, to go with sexual relations. Milamed, from here you learn, so now what does it mean he was tochen bebeit hasurim? People would bring their wives to the Beit HaSurim because he had this amazing capacity of zera, of semen. Basically, they would bring women to get impregnated by him, a little like the Handmaid's Tale almost. Amar Rav Papa, right? The opposite here, but again, using prisoners to have children, it's exactly the same idea. Amar Rav Papa, and this is what people say, like a quip people use on the street. Before the one who drinks wine, they give wine. Before the gardener, gredaya duvla, they bring a basket of vegetables or something else appropriate. Okay, meaning he was a guy who dealt with prostitution in his life, so therefore, right, and was engaged in all sorts of sexual relations with all these women. Therefore, when he gets punished, he gets punished and taken away. They give him what he did in his lifetime. But Amar Rabbi Yochanan, another thing about this. Since we quoted that pasuk in Eov, we're now going to darshan it. Anyone who does nut, his wife is going to also cheat on him. If you cheat on your wife will cheat on you. This is the pasuk from Eov. If I'm enticed, my heart is enticed by some woman, and I laid in wait in my friend's house to get his wife. Right, so my wife will sleep with others or will be slept with by another, and all these men will kind of crouch down on her. And this is what they say. Again, a quip on the street. He is the gourds, and she is zucchinis. Okay? So, in other words, it's all in the same family. If he's going to do one, she's going to do the same thing. But Rabbi Yochanan, another thing about Shimshon. Shimshon danit Yisrael kavihen shebashamayim. Here, all of a sudden, again, a very positive thing about him. He judged the Jewish people like God. How do we know this? Shenemal. Again, we're going to go to those psukim in end of Sefer Bereshit, Parshat Vayechi, when Yaakov gives blessings to the children. Dan's blessings really have a lot to do with Shimshon, according to these psukim. Dan yadin amo ke'achad. It says ke'achad mishivtei Israel, but ke'achad meaning like the one. Who's the one? Like God. So Dan yadin imo, Dan will judge the people like God. So here you see he was a great shofet, a great judge. But Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shimshon, another very positive thing about Shimshon, his name, Al Shmosh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Nikra, he's called in the name of God, Shemesh, Shenemal, Ki Shemesh Umagen Hashem Elokim. Pasuk says that God is a sun and which is actually often understood in that pasuk as a wall, like a big strong wall, and a magen, and a protector. That is God. So here you see Shemesh is actually a name for God, and Shimshon was called in the name of God. Does that mean we can't wipe out the word Shemesh, right? It's like a name of God that can't be erased. Right? Interesting, we're talking about erasing the name of God in the Masechet Sotah, right? Well, we actually do erase the name of God. It's the only time we're allowed to do that. So now they say, well, it's kind of like God's name. Just like God protected the entire world, also Shimshon protected the Jewish people in his generation. So he had some traits like God, but it's not like it was really God's name. Okay, we'll see in a minute why we're getting to Bilam. Bilam couldn't walk on one foot. Shenemal, vayelech shefi. And shefi, shach means kind of taken out. So vayelech shefi meant he went without one leg. What does this have to do with Shimshon? Well, Shimshon chiger b'shtei raglav. He was missing two legs. Shenemal shvifon alei orach. Again, the psukim from the bracha that Yaakov gives to Dan, and it says shvifon alei orach. Basically, he's going to walk. It's like a snake. Nachash alei derech. He's like a snake. Shvifon alei orech, which means he doesn't have, right? He goes on the path like a snake, slithering. He doesn't have legs. That's how you see that Shimshon didn't have legs. Again, it's a drasha. Probably it's not really what happened, because otherwise, how could he have done all the things he did? Right? Maybe he's trying to say how great his strength was, that despite the fact that he didn't have legs, he was still able to accomplish so much. Tanu Rabbanan. Hamisha nivra'u me'en dugma shamala b'kulam laku behem. There were 5 people who created in the image of God in a particular way, and all of them were basically punished in that way. Okay, by that one amazing thing they had, they lost. Okay, and this is again, but this is probably about arrogance. And yes, again, this concept of midah keneged midah. They were very arrogant about one thing, and then that was what brought about their downfall. Shimshon b'kocho. Okay, that's why we're here. Shimshon, his strength was his strength, right? That was his main thing he had going for him, and he actually lost his strength at the end of his life. Shaul b'tzavaro, Shaul, his neck. We're going to get to all these things in a minute. Avshalom b'saro, his hair. Tzikiyahu, his eyes. That was Tzikiyahu, the last king of Yehuda. He gets taken by Nebuchadnezzar to Galut, the exile. And Asa, one of the kings of Yehuda earlier, biragla, okay, his legs. Shimshon b'kocho dichtiv. We're now going to go one by one. Vayasar kocho me'alav. He, in the end, loses his koch. All this psukim we're going to prove is what they lost, not necessarily what they had. Shaul b'tzavaro. First of all, Shaul is called Gavoa Mikol Adam, right? Shichmo with the pasuk. Let me find it here. No, I don't see. Okay. Sorry. It's in Rashi. Vayigba mikol ha'am shichmo. He was taller than everyone else, right? So that means his neck must have been taller. So we have this beautiful tall neck. He takes the sword and he falls onto it. Okay, this is right. He kind of commits suicide at the end of his life. And then the assumption is that he fell on it in the place where generally you kill someone with a sword, which is on his head. This was that whole thing where he wanted to, and he asked someone to kill him. Anyway, okay, 1 second. Just want to find the pasuk for one quick minute. Right, Vayomer Shaul l'nasei kelav shloch harbecha v'daklini v'apen yavo arelim. Right, below Avan, Osei Kelav Kirei Ma'od, and then Shaul, right, he asked him to kill him, but the guy wouldn't do it, and then Shaul takes the cherev and he kills himself. Okay, next. Avshalom b'sa'aro, Kedibin and Lamemar. Come on, as we're going to see further on. Okay, we'll get there. Tzikiyahu be'enav, Dechtiv et einei Tzikiyahu ivel. We don't really see that his eyes were beautiful, but in the end he loses his sight. It must have been that brought his downfall. Asa b'raglav, Asa in his feet. Again, not clear where. Says Asa was strong in his feet, but he ends up getting punished in his feet. What went wrong? How do we know? Only at the end of his life, he got sick in his feet and his legs. What was wrong? Padagra, they explain, is gout. So Marzutra, the son of Rav Nachman, asked his father, Rav Nachman, what is padagra? What is it like? He says, it's like sticking a needle into fresh skin. How did he know? How did Rav Nachman know what gout felt like? Some people said he had it. He was sick with it. Maybe he learned it as a tradition from his rabbi. God reveals his secrets to those who fear him. So he knew it because God revealed it to him. Darash Rabba, mipnei man enash Asa. What was his punishment for? Mipnei she'asa angaria b'tamidei chachamim. He made the Talmidei Chachamim work. Okay, how so? Shenemar v'amelech Asa yishmiya et kol Yehuda ein nakir. The story with Asa and Baasha, the king of Israel. Asa, the king of Yehuda, they were fighting. Baasha set up a siege on Asa and his people, and then Asa gets the help of the king of Aram, and Baasha leaves, but Asa has to take down this big matzor that they built, this big fortress. So he calls everybody in and says, everybody take stones off, and he made everybody work. Okay, it says in the pasuk, right? Ein naki. Everybody in Yehuda had to work. No one was able to go free, meaning he worked, even the Talmidei Chachamim, and they were supposed to be learning. Right? This is the Gemara talking. So those are the people who need to be learning and shouldn't be working. My ein naki. How do we understand ein naki? Amarav Amarav afilu chatan mechedro v'chala mikupatai. Even took the chatan and kala from the wedding and made them come. Tiv vayered Shimshon Timnata. Now we're going to get, as I promised, to the story of Yehuda and Tamar. And we're going to get here for the simple reason that it says Shimshon went down to Timnah. Uchtiv v'hinei chamicha ole Timnata. With Tamar, they tell her, listen, your father-in-law is coming from Timnah, and he's going up to Timnah. So now something doesn't make sense. How did Shimshon go down to Timnah? And Yehuda went up to Timnah. So we're going to have three answers. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Shimshon shenitkaneh ba k'tibei yerida. Shimshon was humiliated by this whole thing. This brought his downfall. That's why it says he went down to Timnah. Right? This brought about, the whole bad story that happened to him. But Yehuda shenit aleba k'tibei aliyah. But Yehuda was brought up by this. Why was he brought up by it? First of all, it brought about the birth of David. And Yehuda in the end admits to failure. And that's his huge, right? He admits his mistake. And that's his huge accomplishment in this chapter. So because of that, it's Oleh. Okay, it has nothing to do with the terrain. It has to do with he was brought up and Shimshon was brought down. Second option, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani amar shtei timnaot hayu, chad b'yerida, chad b'aliyah. These are two different places with the same name. Rav Papa amar chad timna hava. He says, no, there was one place called Timnah. Da'atim ha'gisa yerida, da'atim ha'gisa aliyah. It was in the middle of a mountain. So if you're coming from the top, it's down. If you're coming from the bottom, it's up. Just like Higon Verdonio, Bebe'eli, Veshuka Denarash. Like some other places with those, right, with the same kind of idea. These are obviously places in Babylonia that they were familiar with that had a similar thing. It was a city in the middle of the mountain. Now it says that she went, this is when she attracted Yehuda to come sleep with her, right? She took off her b'dei amanut, she puts on a tzeif, she puts on the scarf, and okay, so she goes there. So now they say, by the way, right, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. When they said to Tamar, your father-in-law is coming, that was before, when she actually then goes to attract him. Okay, so now, the next thing, so the next pasuk after, he goes down to Timnah, and she found out that he was going up to Timnah, then she's sitting b'petach einayim. Amar Rabbi Alexander, melamed sha'achavi yashvala b'pitcho shel Avraham Avinu. What's bothering the rabbis here is Petach Einayim never comes up anywhere else in the Torah. So what is this place, Petach Einayim? They say it's not really a place, according to Rabbi Alexandri. It was that she sat there like the Petach of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu, we all know, had this big tent and 4 openings. Everybody was welcome in. She stood there, makom shekol einav tzofo livoto. Everybody looks there. She was in a very central location. Rav Chanina Marav, makom sheshmo Einayim. No, the name of the place was Einayim. They called it the Petach, the entrance of Einayim. Where do we see it? V'cheinu omer in Sefer Yoshua, Tapuach, which is one place, V'einam, which is another place. Einam, like Einayim. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, our third answer, Shenatna Einayim lidvarem. She had an answer for every question he had. So he comes up to this prostitute, right, which he thinks is. Hishetavah, when he went to sleep with her, Amarla, he said to her, Shema Necholikat, maybe you're not Jewish. Amrale Gioret, and she said, I converted. She had an answer for everything else. Shema Ishet Ishat, maybe you're married. Amrale Pnuyani, no, I'm not married, I'm single. Shema Kibel B'Chavich Kiddushin, maybe your father betrothed you to someone. Amra, right, maybe you don't know. Amra Yitomat, right, she said, I'm a Yitomah, okay? Yitomani. I'm an orphan. Amra, so it can't be my father took Kiddushin for me. Shema Tme'at, maybe you're impure. Amra Le Torani, right, I don't have my period now, I'm pure. Vayata Esha B'Be'er Sheva. Okay, now, because we mentioned the Petach of Avraham Avinu, now we switch and we talk about what Avraham had in Beersheba. So he made an Esha. Amar Rish Lakish, Melamed she'asa pardes v'natabo kol minei megadim. He had an orchard with lots of things. That's why it says Vayita, he planted. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nechemia, Chad amar pardes, Chad amar pundak. So Rabbi Nechemia and Rabbi Yehuda have a debate. Was it an orchard or was it an inn, right, where he basically had people coming all the time. He planted, you don't usually plant a house. But if you say it was an inn, why the word vayita, planted? What do you mean? We have this in other places. Vayita oholea pando. A panda is a castle, a palace. So here you see, you could use nitia, planting with a palace. So therefore, it could be that it really was a place to live, and it was more like an inn. And either which way, it was a place to invite people, either to eat in his orchard or to sleep. Vayikasham, okay, in this place, this eshel he made in Beersheba, continuation of that pasuk is, and he called there B'Shem Hashem El Olam, called there in the name of God, the God of the world. Amar Rish Lakish, al tikri vayika, don't read it as vayika, moving now to Amud Bet, ela vayakri. He had people call out. It wasn't just that he called in the name of God, he got other people to call out in the name of God. Shekri Avraham Avinu l'shmo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'peh kol over v'shah. He made everybody who came to his house call out in the name of God. How did he do that? Ketzad. Someone comes to your house, you feed them, they thank you. So everyone stood up to thank him. He'd say to them, what, you think you ate my food? No, you're eating the food from God. Go praise and bless the one who said, let the world be. And with that, he was able to get people to recognize God. That was Abraham's great, right, accomplishment, according to the Midrash anyway, that he basically brought lots of people to understand about monotheism. That was an aside about Avram. We got there from the Petach Einayim of Tamar, and we got there from the Vayered and Vayaleh L'Timna, from Shimshon. So now we're continuing in the Yehuda and Tamar story. So he sees her, and he thinks she's a prostitute. Why? Because she was covering her face. Something about that pasuk doesn't jive. Because she was covering her face, he thought she was a zonah. No, it wasn't that she covered her face now. It was that she had covered her face when she would go to Yehuda's house before, so he didn't recognize her. So he said the following: any kala who keeps herself in a, dresses sanua modestly in her father-in-law's house, so she is rewarded that she will have kings and prophets come from her. Minala, where is this learned from? Tamar. We learned this from Tamar. Why? What Nevi'im came from Tamar? Nevi'im, Dichtiv Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amos. In a minute, we're going to prove how we know Yeshayahu came from Yehuda. Ren came from David. Melachim mi David. The kings came from David, obviously came from Tamar. V'amar Rabbi Levi, Davar ze mesorah biyadenu me'avotenu, Amos v'Amatzia achim hayu. Amos was the brother of Amatzia, and Amatzia was the king of Yehuda, and Amos was the father of Yeshayahu, was his brother. So that means he came from the house of David, came from Tamar. So there you have it. Again, what did she do? She was sanua in her father-in-law's house. That's why Yehuda didn't recognize her, because she dressed modestly there. Again, covering your face is not exactly what we call modesty, right? We don't think that that's what one needs to do, but the point, right, again, exaggerated story to make a point. Because of that, she was zocheh. She merited to have prophets and kings. He mutzet. Now what happens? So now they take her out. They find out she's pregnant. They take her out. So the word mutzet is a bit of a weird usage. And the Gemara says, he mitotzet mebaile. It should have been, okay, it's also a very weird word, mitotzet, that they suggest, but it basically should have said she was taken out. And he mutzet sounds more like she was found, or she found something, or something like that. So we're going to have a drasha here that says they wanted to teach her that she actually lost something and found it. What was that? So remember the story, what happens? They're about to burn her, and she says, wait, I want to show you. And she takes out all the things he left behind. He made her leave. She made him leave things behind. She pulls them out and she says, whoever these are, right? Hakerna, recognize, right? Who recognizes these? Whose are they? Yehuda comes forward and says they're mine. And then he admits to what had happened, and then they don't kill her. So now, why does it say himutzeit? Amar Rabbi Elazar, la'achar shenimtzeu simaneha, after she found the simanim that he had left, the things he had left behind, bas Samael v'richkan. Samael is the king, the angel who represents the nation of Edom. Now Edom, Samael, their angel, knew that David was going to, in the end, destroy them or fight against them. He didn't want to be born. He wanted to protect them. So he hid them, because if he took them away from her, Richkan, he separated them from her. He made her lose them. So that basically she wouldn't be able to show her innocence, and then they would kill her. But then Gabriel came and brought them back, because Gabriel is the angel for the Jews. And there, okay, so that already explains why it's himutzei, because she found them. They were lost, and then she found them. And there's also a reference to this in the pasuk, Lamanetzech al Yonat Elam Rechokim. Okay, the dove who was silent. So now they say, what's Elam Yonat Elam? And then it says L'David Michtam. So let's explain this. Lamanetzech al Yonat Elam Rechokim, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Misha'a shenitrachku simaneha, when the simanim she had, those things that Yehuda left behind, got lost, na'aset ki yonai lemet, she became like a dove who couldn't speak. L'David Michtam, she'yatza mimenu David, shaya mach betam leko. The David Michtam is a reference to David. Why Michtam? Mach is modest, and Tam is complete. So he was modest and complete to all. Davar acher, a different explanation of Michtam. We're going to have 3 explanations. Shaitam makato tama, his wound was whole. Shenolad mahu, which means he was already born circumcised. Davar acher, Michtam, this is more like the first one. Kashem shebakadnuto hiktin atzmo etzel misha gadol mimenu lomod Torah. Just like when he was young, he made himself, low and modest in order to learn Torah from people who knew more than him. As he got older and knew more, he still treated his learning with modesty and tried to always learn from others. So now she sends to her father-in-law to say, whoever these are, this is who I got pregnant from. Why didn't she just say it straight? You got me pregnant. Another thing we're going to learn from her, either Rav Tuvia said it, Rav Zutra Bar Tuvia in the name of Rav, or Amrila, Amar Rav Chana Bar Bizna, Amar Rav Shimon Chasida, or Rav Chana Bar Bizna said in the name of Rav Shimon Chasida, or Amrila, some people say Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Noach lo la'adam she'apil atzmo l'toch kivshan ha'esh va'al yabin pnei chaviro berabim. Nala mitama. Who do we learn this from? Tamar. What do we learn? Better to put yourself into a fiery furnace. She was going to get burned than to embarrass someone in public. And that's why she didn't say Yehuda was you. She was hoping that he would admit it himself, but not that she would humiliate him. Hakerna. Why does it say the language of Hakerna? There's a very famous comparison. Hakerna, recognize. Now, Amar Rabbi Chama Rabbi Chanina. Behakel biser la'aviv. The brothers told Yaakov when they pretended that Yosef was dead and they brought back the bloody tonet pasim, right, the colored coat, striped cloak. They said Akerna, okay, we're going to see in a minute, and therefore Bahakir bisluhu, so that he basically got, they used that same language to bring him down. Bahakir bisel, they gave the message to Yaakov in that way. Hakerna haktonet bin chahi, do you recognize this is the ktonet of your son? Ubahakir bisluhu hakerna lemi, and then right, he got told, oh, do you recognize this? So it was again like our theme, and now you see why they brought this up, not just because of the Yered and V'Yalet Timnata, but also it's another theme of Midah K'neged Midah. Na, why does it say Haker na lemi? Why not? Ein na ela lashon bakasha. It's please, it's begging. Why did she say it begging way? Amara le bevakasha mimcha haker pnei borecha va'al tali mincha mimeni. Please recognize your God and don't lie in front of all these people, right? God knows the truth and you know the truth, and admit it, because otherwise I'm going to be killed. So he recognizes it and he says, Tzadka, she's right, and mimeni, meaning, and from me she got pregnant. That's her pregnancy is from me. So Hainu Damar Rav Chanan Bar Bizna Amar Rabbi Shimon Chasida Yosef Shekidei Shem Shamayim Besetel. Yosef, who stood up to Esha Potiphar, but in secret, nobody else was there. He got one letter from the name of God. Dichtiv edip bihosif shmo. Right, bihosef shmo, they added a hey to his name in that pasuk. Yehuda shekidei shem shamayim beparhesia, but he was sanctified by the name of God by admitting his mistake in public, and therefore zachav v'nikra kulo al shmo shel hakadosh baruch hu. His whole name, obviously his name came before, but it was almost a reference to what he was going to do in the future. Because he admitted he was wrong, and said she's right, and I impregnated her. Yet stabat kova ambra, a heavenly voice came down and said, you saved her and her 2 sons that were in her womb, right, from being destroyed in the fire. Because of that, I will save. Again, this is the midah keneged midah in a positive way. I will save shloshami banecha min ha'or, 3 of your sons from the fire. Who is that? Man, Minhu. Who are these? Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Much later in history, right, in Sefer Daniel, where they get saved. Sadka mimeni minayada. How did he know she was pregnant with his child? It could have been someone else's child. Yatzta bat kova amra mimeni yatsu kfushim. All different interpretations of what this kfushim is. It seems to be something hidden. But basically, a heavenly voice came down and said, "From you came these hidden things." Okay, that basically it was God's will that they're going to be kings, something like that. There's all different ways to understand. Maybe kfushim also is those who will conquer. Okay. Below yasaf od l'da'atam. How to translate this pasuk? Amal Shmuel Saba Chamua de Rav Shmuel Bar Ami, Mishmei de Rav Shmuel Bar Ami. So the Saba, father-in-law of, I don't know how to explain all that, but okay, said in the name of Rav Shmuel Bar Ami, Kevan sheyad'a shuv lo pasak mimen. Once he knew her in the biblical way, once he never stopped having relations with her. Tiv hatam v'lo yasaf od l'da'atal. Tiv hachan. Here it says v'lo yasaf, right? He didn't add, right, what that means exactly means he didn't ever stop having relations with her. It doesn't mean they have relations all the time. It just means they continue to live together as husband and wife. Uchtiv hatam, this is learned from this pasuk, kol gadol v'lo yasaf, which is describing Matan Torah and Sefer Dvarim. It was a kol gadol of God, and lo yasaf, meaning it didn't stop, it continued. Avshalom. Okay, that's the end of the section of Shimshon, which from Shimshon we got led to Tamar and Yehuda. From Tamar and Yehuda we got led to Avram. From there back to Tamar and Yehuda, and then we now get to Avshalom that was mentioned in the Mishnah. All right, so that ends the Shimshon section. Avshalom nitga'eh b'sa'aro. Tanu Rabbanan. So now how do we know this? Avshalom b'sa'aro marad. He rebelled using his hair. How do we know? Shenema. There was no one as beautiful as the Avshalom, the pasuk tells us, and he would shave his head, right? He would basically, once in a while, he was a Nazir. We learned this in Masechet Nazir, and he would grow his hair long, and then every once in a while he would shave it, and then it would weigh, right? Weigh this large amount in the Even HaMelech and the weights of the king, and obviously he had this beautiful hair. Tana. It was a stone used by the people in Tiberia and Tzipori. The Tzipori Shiurim were known to be greater. It was like a bigger stone, meaning it was worth a lot. Leficha, because it obviously made him arrogant, this whole thing. Therefore, nitzla b'saro, he gets hung by his hair. How do we know this? Shenema, v'yikareh Avshalom l'fnei avdei David. He was called before the servants of David. V'Avshalom rochev al hapered. He's riding on the mule. V'yavo hapered tachat shover chayla gdola. He gets under the leaves and the foliage of the big elah tree. Vayochez rosho be'elah, and then his head gets stuck on the tree. Vayutan ben hashamayim uben haaretz, and he ends up being hanging by his hair between heaven and earth. And va'pered asher tachtav aval, and then the pered, the mule, basically runs off, and he's stuck there hanging. So there you see his hair basically killed him. Shakal sapsira, now the story tells he took a sapsira, he took one something that he can use that he had with his weapons to cut his hair by lemifsake, right, in order to cut it so he wouldn't be hanging anymore and he'd fall on the ground. But right then the ground underneath him opened up, and basically if he would do that he would fall into this huge ditch and die. Then it says when David heard that he died, he starts to cry, because in the end he was his son. And this is what he said when he left: B'ni Avshalom, b'ni b'ni, my son Avshalom, my son Avshalom. Mi yitei muti ani tachtecha, I wish I had died instead of you. Avshalom, b'ni b'ni, Avshalom, my son. Notice already 5 mentions of the word son. V'hamelech la'atek panav v'yis'ak. Hamelech kol gadol b'ni Avshalom, Avshalom b'ni b'ni. Another 3 mentions of the word b'ni. Okay, so hani timnaya b'ni lama. Why did it say b'ni 8 times? Shiv'ah da'aske m'shiva midorei gehenom. First 7 were to get him out from the 7 depths of Gehenom, the 7 levels. Okay, there's 7 levels of the firmament. There's also 7 levels of Gehenom, of hell. V'idach, and the last one, so this is machloket, ikad amre to karev reishe kabei gufe. His head had been severed from his body, so he wanted his head to get back together with his body. Some people say it was to get him into Olam Haba. This is something Avshalom did. He basically, in his lifetime, he made a matzeva with his name. It was called Yad Avshalom because he didn't have any children. So he wanted to keep his name going, so he made this matzeva. Can't think of the word, right? When you put like stones down to remember something. My lakach, why does it say lakach vayatzav lo b'chayav? It could have just said vayatzav lo matzeva. Why do you have to say he took and made a matzeva? He made a bad purchase in his life. Like he made a big mistake. Why is it called this matzevet was be'emek hamelech? What's emek a reference to? This whole rebellion that he did, which was this mekachra, right? He made a bad choice. Well, it was all the deep advice of God, which was part of God's plan. This is kind of like the Shimshon. Maybe he didn't do things right, but it was all God's plan. Likewise here, how do we know this? Dichtiv, just continuing into tomorrow's daf for a second. Okay, in other words, David is told that something's bad is going to happen, and that your son's going to rebel, and therefore you see that this was really part of God's plan, that Avshalom was going to rebel. And that was because of what he did with Bathsheba. Okay, that's it for today. So we saw whole slew of midrashim, very associative connections, very typical of these kind of dapim, where we start with one midrash and then we just keep going and going and going and bringing psukim, darshaning them to see different elements and different sides of these stories and getting more details, right? The midrash loves to elaborate on details of what happened in these stories and fill in the blanks using their tools of how to darshan psukim. That's it for today. Wishing everyone Shabbat Shalom, Ma'adim L'Simcha.